Spain and Portugal, two neighboring nations on the Iberian Peninsula, share a rich history intertwined with shared borders and cultural similarities. Both countries emerged as major colonial powers, leaving an enduring legacy on the world stage. Despite their proximity and Spain's immense power, Portugal managed to maintain its independence. This raises a compelling question. Why didn't Spain conquer Portugal despite its proximity and power? Portugal's independence as a kingdom emerged during the 12th century amidst the Christian Reconquista, a period of reclaiming the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule. Central to this transformation was Afonso Henriques, Count of Portugal, who became the nation's first king after the pivotal Battle of Ourique in 1139. According to legend, Afonso received a divine vision of Jesus Christ before the battle, inspiring him and his troops to defeat a much larger Muslim army. This victory, while partly mythological, marked a turning point in Portugal's history. It reinforced Afonso's authority, enabling him to assert Portugal's independence from its suzerain, the Kingdom of Leon. The Battle of Ourique became a symbolic moment of Portugal's emergence as a distinct Christian kingdom. Portugal's independence was formally recognized with the Treaty of Zamora in 1143. Following years of conflict and negotiation, Afonso VII of Leon, Afonso Henriques' cousin, acknowledged Portugal as a sovereign kingdom. Signed in Zamora, the treaty was a significant milestone in Portuguese history, legitimizing its autonomy. The Catholic Church played a crucial role in solidifying this independence. Pope Innocent II, aligning with the Church's broader goals during the Reconquista, mediated the treaty. The papal endorsement not only strengthened Portugal's Christian identity, but also ensured its status as an independent state. This recognition ended disputes over Portugal's legitimacy and paved the way for territorial consolidation, securing its position as a stable Christian kingdom on the Iberian Peninsula. Afonso Henriques' leadership, combined with the Treaty of Zamora, defined Portugal's national identity and sovereignty. These foundational events set Portugal apart from its larger, often fragmented Iberian neighbors, marking it as a resilient and distinct entity in the region. Spain's inability to subdue Portugal early on can be attributed to its preoccupation with the Reconquista. This centuries-long campaign to reclaim Iberian lands from Muslim rule began after the Moors' invasion in 711. During much of this period, the Spanish Christian kingdoms prioritized defeating Muslim forces over expanding into Christian-controlled territories like Portugal. The Reconquista was neither unified nor swift. It spanned nearly 8 centuries and demanded immense resources, manpower, and strategic alliances. Key victories, such as the capture of Toledo in 1085 and the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa in 1212, demonstrated progress, but also revealed the effort's prolonged and fragmented nature. By the 12th century, when Portugal emerged as a kingdom, Spanish forces were still heavily engaged in southern Iberia, leaving little focus for an incursion into Portuguese lands. Additionally, Portugal played an active role in the Reconquista, positioning itself as a Christian ally rather than a rival. This mutual participation in the larger struggle against Muslim forces strengthened Portugal's status as a partner in the Iberian campaign, reducing the likelihood of conflict with Spain. Another factor was Spain's fragmented political landscape. The Iberian Peninsula was divided among several independent kingdoms, including Castile, Aragon, Leon, and Navarre. These entities often competed with one another for territory and influence. Internal rivalries and regional priorities, particularly between dominant kingdoms, hindered unified efforts against Portugal. Thus, Spain's focus on the Reconquista and its own political divisions enabled Portugal to solidify its independence and establish itself as a distinct and enduring Christian kingdom. The eventual unification of Spain under Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile in 1469 was a turning point. But even then, Spain's focus remained on completing the Reconquista and expanding its influence overseas. By the time Spain was unified, Portugal was already firmly established as an independent kingdom with its own alliances and colonial ambitions. This combination of internal conflicts and a prolonged focus on reclaiming land from the Moors made it unlikely for Spain to direct its attention toward conquering Portugal. Another reason is the geographical landscape of the Iberian Peninsula that played a crucial role in maintaining Portugal's independence from Spain. Natural features, such as mountains and rivers, created physical barriers that separated the two countries and made large-scale invasions more difficult. One of the most significant geographical features is the Serra da Estrela, the highest mountain range in mainland Portugal. Although not as tall as the Pyrenees, these mountains, along with others like the Montesinho and the border-high Tagus River, formed natural defenses that complicated military incursions. Rivers such as the Minho in the north, the Douro running through central regions, and the Guadiana in the south served as additional obstacles for any invading forces. These waterways not only hindered troop movements, but also provided a natural framework for fortifications and defensive positions. Historically, armies in medieval Europe depended heavily on supply lines and favorable terrain. The rugged and uneven geography of the Portuguese border meant that any invasion required overcoming significant logistical challenges. These features naturally limited the scale and speed of potential campaigns, giving Portugal time to prepare defenses and counterattacks. Portugal's geographic position as a coastal nation on the western edge of the Iberian Peninsula further bolstered its defensive advantage. Its narrow shape, stretching from north to south along the Atlantic Ocean, allowed it to focus its defenses along the eastern border shared with Spain. With Spain unable to attack from the west due to the Atlantic, Portugal could concentrate resources and fortifications along its land borders. The Portuguese also capitalized on their geographical advantages by building a network of castles and strongholds along their frontier. Cities like Almeida, Elvas, and Marvao were fortified and strategically placed to defend against potential invasions. These fortresses took advantage of the natural landscape, using elevated positions to monitor and repel incoming threats. Additionally, Portugal's control over key waterways allowed it to use rivers for transportation, trade, and reinforcement during conflicts. This ensured that supplies and troops could move efficiently within the kingdom, even when under threat. The combination of these natural and strategic advantages created a formidable defense system. Together with the challenges posed by the terrain, these factors contributed to Portugal's ability to maintain its sovereignty even during times of Spanish expansionism or military dominance. One of the most significant factors in Portugal's survival as an independent nation was its alliance with England, solidified by the Treaty of Windsor in 1386. As one of the oldest diplomatic alliances in the world still in effect, this treaty established mutual military and political support, providing Portugal with a critical safeguard against Spanish dominance. The treaty emerged during a turbulent period in Iberian history when Portugal faced threats from Castile, which sought to absorb its smaller neighbor. England, engaged in the 100 Years' War against France, sought dependable allies. The Treaty of Windsor created a framework for cooperation, giving Portugal a powerful protector and granting England a strategic foothold on the Iberian Peninsula. A key outcome of this alliance was the marriage between King John I of Portugal and Philippa of Lancaster, daughter of England's John of Gaunt. This union symbolized the strength of the alliance and fostered a lasting cultural and political connection between the two nations. The Anglo-Portuguese alliance effectively deterred Spanish aggression. Spain, often preoccupied with conflicts such as the wars with France and England, hesitated to confront Portugal directly, knowing it would provoke English intervention. For instance, during the Portuguese Restoration War, England provided vital support in the form of troops and resources, helping Portugal reclaim its sovereignty after the Iberian Union. Beyond military cooperation, the alliance strengthened Portugal's economy. Trade agreements with England, particularly in wine and textiles, bolstered Portuguese commerce, enabling the nation to sustain its defenses and focus on colonial expansion. This enduring relationship with England provided Portugal with both a shield against Spanish ambitions and the freedom to pursue its global maritime interests. The Treaty of Windsor not only secured Portugal's independence, but also positioned the kingdom as a resilient and resourceful power on the international stage. Portugal's ability to maintain its independence from Spain was shaped by a combination of geographical features, strategic fortifications, and military preparedness. These factors not only limited Spain's ability to invade, but also allowed Portugal to focus its resources effectively along its borders. The Iberian Peninsula's natural landscape created significant barriers that safeguarded Portugal from large-scale invasions. Mountains like the Serra da Estrela, Montesinho, and other rugged ranges along the border provided formidable natural defenses. Rivers such as the Minho in the north, the Douro in central Portugal, the Tagus cutting through the heart of the country, and the Guadiana in the south further complicated military incursions. These waterways acted as natural obstacles, limiting troop movements and offering strategic locations for fortifications. Portugal's geographic position along the Atlantic Ocean enhanced its defensive advantage. Its narrow landmass allowed the kingdom to focus its defenses on its eastern border with Spain, while its western coast remained inaccessible to land-based threats. This geography concentrated Portugal's military efforts, ensuring a unified and efficient defense system. The kingdom maximized these natural barriers by constructing a network of strongholds and fortifications along its border. Cities like Almeida, Elvas, and Marvao became key defensive points, leveraging their elevated positions to repel invasions. Fortresses were often designed to align with the rugged terrain, enhancing their strategic value. For instance, Elvas and Almeida featured star-shaped bastions that were particularly effective in resisting sieges, making them critical to Portugal's frontier defense. Rivers played an equally crucial role in Portugal's defense and logistics. They provided efficient transportation routes for troops and supplies, ensuring that reinforcements could be mobilized quickly during conflicts. This internal connectivity bolstered Portugal's ability to respond to threats, even when under pressure. Portugal's military strategy also benefited from its maritime capabilities. By the 15th century, Portugal had emerged as a leading naval power, spearheading the age of exploration under figures like Prince Henry the Navigator. The navy was not only an instrument of overseas expansion, but also a key component of national defense. It protected Portugal's coasts from foreign incursions, including potential threats from Spain, and complemented the kingdom's land-based fortifications. Coastal defenses were another vital aspect of Portugal's security. Fortresses in strategic locations like Lisbon and Cascais guarded key ports and entry points, ensuring the protection of maritime trade and territorial waters. The combination of naval strength and coastal fortifications allowed Portugal to safeguard its sovereignty. Even as Spain grew more powerful, Portugal's smaller army compensated for its size with strategic positioning and highly effective use of fortifications. By leveraging the natural barriers of rivers and mountains, the army could focus on defending specific points rather than stretching itself thin. Strongholds like Almeida and Elvas were instrumental in this strategy, acting as hubs for resistance and slowing down invading forces. The challenges posed by Portugal's terrain made invasions costly and logistically complex for Spain. Rugged landscapes disrupted supply lines and prolonged campaigns, giving Portugal the time and opportunity to prepare countermeasures. This advantage was particularly significant during the medieval and early modern periods, when armies relied heavily on accessible terrain and steady supplies. By the time Spain unified under Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile in 1469, Portugal was already an established kingdom with robust defenses and a growing overseas empire, while Spain focused on completing the Reconquista and expanding its influence abroad. Portugal capitalized on its geographical and military strengths to maintain its sovereignty. The natural defenses of the Iberian Peninsula, fortified cities, and naval power created a resilient system that deterred Spanish expansionism. Spain's ambitions after unification under Ferdinand and Isabella in the late 15th century were concentrated on overseas expansion and European conflicts, leaving little capacity to pursue the conquest of Portugal. The establishment of a vast colonial empire consumed Spain's financial and military resources. Conquests by figures like Hernán Cortés in Mexico and Francisco Pizarro in Peru required extensive funding, manpower, and administrative focus. Maintaining control over territories in the Americas and Asia further strained Spain's ability to direct its attention toward its Iberian neighbor. Simultaneously, Spain was deeply entangled in wars across Europe. Conflicts like the 80 Years' War with the Dutch and the Anglo-Spanish War against England drained its military strength and financial reserves. Spain's rivalry with France also resulted in frequent clashes, diverting resources to defend and expand its continental holdings. These overlapping commitments meant that Spain's priorities lay in maintaining its empire and waging wars on multiple fronts rather than attempting to subjugate Portugal. The smaller kingdom used this distraction to fortify its defenses and strengthen its independence. Portugal, on the other hand, capitalized on Spain's divided focus to consolidate its sovereignty, even during times of Spanish dominance in Europe and overseas. During the Age of Exploration, Portugal and Spain emerged as global powers focused on building overseas empires rather than dominating each other. Their competition revolved around controlling trade routes and colonial territories in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, but economic interdependence tempered their rivalry. Portugal pioneered exploration, establishing a trading empire through strategic ports along key maritime routes. It controlled lucrative spice trade networks in the Indian Ocean and maintained colonies in India, Africa, Southeast Asia, and Brazil. These endeavors brought Portugal immense wealth and global influence. Spain, following Columbus's voyages, concentrated on the Americas, amassing vast territories in Mexico, Peru, and the Caribbean. Its empire relied heavily on mining gold and silver, which fueled its military campaigns and European ambitions. The Treaty of Tordesillas, mediated by the Pope in 1494, divided the newly discovered lands between the two nations along a demarcation line. This agreement minimized direct conflict, allowing each to exploit their respective colonial spheres of influence without competing militarily. Despite their rivalry, the two nations were economically interdependent. Portugal's access to spices, sugar, and other goods from its colonies complemented Spain's wealth in precious metals and agricultural products. This economic cooperation was further evident during the Iberian Union, 1580–1640, when both kingdoms were temporarily ruled under a single crown. While politically contentious, the Union underscored their shared reliance on colonial trade networks. Spanish merchants depended on Portuguese access to Asian markets, while Portuguese traders benefited from Spanish-controlled transatlantic routes. A Spanish conquest of Portugal would have jeopardized this economic balance. The costs of integrating Portugal's trade systems and colonies, combined with Spain's commitments to European wars and colonial administration, made such an endeavor impractical. Instead, allowing Portugal to remain independent ensured economic collaboration while avoiding the disruption and expense of direct conflict. Ultimately, their shared focus on colonial expansion and mutual economic benefits helped maintain a competitive yet cooperative relationship, solidifying their status as global powers during the Age of Exploration. The Iberian Union marked a unique period in Iberian history, as Portugal and Spain were united under the Spanish monarchy. This union arose after Portugal faced a dynastic crisis when King Sebastian died without an heir in 1578. Following a brief reign by Cardinal Henry, Philip II of Spain claimed the Portuguese throne through his maternal lineage. Backed by Spanish military forces, Philip secured the crown in 1581, becoming King of Portugal under the condition that Portugal retained its autonomy, laws, language, and colonial empire. While the union brought strategic benefits to Spain, granting it access to Portugal's trade networks and colonies, it quickly strained relations. Portuguese merchants and nobles grew discontent with Spain's prioritization of its European wars, which drained resources and left Portuguese colonies vulnerable to attacks from rivals like the Dutch and English. Resentment simmered as Portuguese autonomy was undermined by Spanish dominance. By 1640, dissatisfaction culminated in a rebellion led by the Duke of Braganza, who was declared King John IV of Portugal. This marked the beginning of the Portuguese Restoration War, as Portugal fought to restore its sovereignty. The conflict was characterized by sporadic but decisive battles, such as the Battle of Montes Claros in 1665, where Portuguese forces dealt a final blow to Spain's attempts at reconquest. Portugal's resilience was bolstered by its strategic alliances, particularly with England. Through the marriage of King Charles II of England and Catherine of Braganza, Portugal received critical military and financial aid. These alliances strengthened Portugal's position while further stretching Spain's resources. Spain's inability to subdue Portugal was compounded by its overextension. In addition to the Restoration War, Spain was embroiled in the 30 Years' War, conflicts with France, and the Catalonian Revolt. These simultaneous pressures drained Spain's manpower and treasury, leaving little capacity for a prolonged campaign against Portugal. Portugal's victory in the Restoration War in 1668, formalized by the Treaty of Lisbon, reinforced its sovereignty. However, the conflict also underscored the strength of Portuguese national identity, rooted in its distinct language, culture, and maritime heritage. Throughout the Iberian Union, Portugal's cultural autonomy remained intact. Its unique traditions, such as fado music, maritime achievements, and architectural styles, solidified a collective identity that resisted assimilation. While Spanish rule sought to integrate Portugal into a unified crown, the Portuguese maintained their legal and institutional independence, preserving their distinct national character. This deeply ingrained identity fueled resistance during the Iberian Union and Restoration War. The successful rebellion demonstrated the resilience of Portuguese pride and its determination to maintain independence. Ultimately, Portugal's ability to navigate the challenges of the Iberian Union and assert its sovereignty during the Restoration War highlighted the enduring strength of its national identity and its place as a distinct and autonomous nation in European history. Throughout its history, Portugal has relied on diplomatic strategies to safeguard its sovereignty, particularly when faced with the threat of larger, more powerful neighbors like Spain. Recognizing its military limitations, Portugal often sought to form alliances and make strategic diplomatic moves that would help protect its independence. One of the most notable examples of this approach was the Treaty of Windsor in 1386. This alliance with England was pivotal in ensuring Portugal's survival as an independent kingdom. The treaty promised mutual defense, with England offering military support in exchange for trade privileges and political cooperation. Portugal also made diplomatic efforts to secure its global position during the Age of Exploration. As European powers competed for overseas colonies, Portugal used diplomacy to assert its rights to territories in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, often through papal decrees like the Treaty of Tordesillas. This treaty, brokered by the Pope, divided the newly discovered lands between Portugal and Spain, reducing direct conflicts between the two. Such diplomatic efforts were crucial in maintaining Portugal's influence in its colonies, while avoiding direct confrontation with Spain. In addition to formal treaties, Portugal often employed diplomacy to form beneficial trade relationships, notably with France, the Netherlands, and other European powers, ensuring that it was not isolated in the shifting alliances of 16th and 17th century Europe. These diplomatic ties provided Portugal with the support it needed to withstand Spanish efforts to conquer or dominate it, especially during the difficult period of the Iberian Union. Portugal's diplomatic efforts were also shaped by the broader dynamics of European balance of power politics. The concept of balance of power refers to the practice of preventing any one nation from becoming too dominant by forming alliances and counter-alliances. Portugal skillfully navigated this system to avoid being overwhelmed by Spain or other European powers. During the Iberian Union, for example, Spain's conflicts with France and England limited its ability to focus solely on Portugal. Portugal took advantage of this by fostering closer ties with France and England, using these alliances to deter Spanish aggression. The Treaty of Windsor with England was a key part of this strategy, ensuring English support for Portuguese independence. Similarly, Portugal played a key role in balancing the power dynamics between Spain, France, and England by offering itself as an ally to the nation whose interests most aligned with Portuguese sovereignty. This balancing act allowed Portugal to maintain its autonomy even when its larger neighbors were embroiled in wars, such as the 30 Years' War and the Franco-Spanish Wars. Portugal's diplomatic skill in these situations ensured its survival and independence, helping it avoid being subsumed by the larger, more powerful states around it. That ends today's video. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more stories from the past.